The 9th episode of the 6th season, Fun and Games, is a huge episode in the Better Call Saul series. The episode focuses on putting things in and out of place. And we see that by the end of the episode, everything is in place for the Breaking Bad timeline. We didn't see a lot of it, actually, but there were a lot of things put in Jimmy's life to ready him for the Breaking Bad timeline, like his Cadillac, his Better Call Saul logo, and the interior of his office. But we also saw things taken out of Jimmy's life to prepare him for the Breaking Bad timeline, such as Kim. The other major part of this episode is that it highlights a pillar of this series, and that is this idea of who people are versus who they pretend to be. And what we saw in this episode was Mike, Kim, and Jimmy pretending to be someone that they're not. So let's take a look at this episode, at the things that they put in and out of place, and why by the end of the episode, Kim is more like Gus than Mike and Jimmy.
I'm G, and this is the G spot.
The opening of the episode is really beautiful. The transitions are pretty amazing. And what we see through these transitions is how Mike, Jimmy, and Kim are so intertwined at this moment. They are all trying to deal with getting over what happened to Howard, the murder of Howard. We do see a lot of things going in and out of place. It starts with Jimmy putting his Saul Goodman and Associates sign in place. Quick note, we actually never see the sign put in place. And by the end of the episode, the sign's gone. I don't know why, but I got a really big kick out of that we actually never saw the sign in place. Honestly, I imagine it's a production thing. I don't think it says anything about the series. But after the sign, we see the sign being put in place, we see Jimmy going into his office. And if we note at this point, Jimmy is very up. I don't really see him having any residual effects from everything that happened with Howard. He does not seem bothered by it. He doesn't seem bothered by it through the whole opening. After we see Jimmy going into the office, we see Kim coming out of the courtroom. There's definitely more in for Jimmy and out for Kim in this opening, which makes a lot of sense because as we're going to see by the end of the episode, Kim comes out of Jimmy's life in this episode. In the opening, Mike is busy covering up what happened to Howard. We see him taking this bullet out of place. Mike is being really meticulous to make sure that there is no trace or evidence left. The opening ends with Jimmy giving Kim the speech that Mike gave to Jimmy in Bad Choice Road. And I think that this speech does become significant. Even Kim does not really connect to the advice that Jimmy is giving her, but I do think that this speech becomes significant at the end of the episode. It was Lalo's own plan to go into hiding and fake his own death that provided the perfect alibi for Gus to kill Lalo. Gus's response to Hector's accusation really puts Hector in his place because Gus doesn't have a response. He refuses to respond. He dismisses Hector's accusation as completely foolish because it's like he's talking about a ghost. There are plenty of reasons to believe that Lalo really died in the attack. And then we see that Hector is dismissed from the inner circle of the cartel at the end of this meeting. Don Eladio tells him to go inside. And we see the twins take Hector out of his place in the circle and put him in his new place, which is outside of the cartel's inner circle. At the very end of this meeting, Don Eladio gives Gus a line about making sure that he stays in his place. But then Gus walks over to the pool and stares into the water. We do know what this is about from Breaking Bad and the incident that occurred at the pool with Gus. And so at this point, Gus is happy. Gus is one step closer, a big step closer to having everything he needs in place for getting his revenge or getting his blood for blood with the cartel. His place, he can move back into his place. And the first thing Gus does is he lets the light into his home. Taking out Lalo was a huge thing for Gus. Everything's been put on hold since Lalo started meddling in Gus's life. He is definitely coming out of hibernation and re-embracing the world around him, in a sense. Then he heads downstairs to the entrance of the tunnel where Mike meets him. He talks to Mike about getting the lab up and running. And then at the very end of this discussion between Mike and Gus, we get a big signal about where their relationship is. In the beginning of this season, Mike had a lot to say to Gus about how Gus was handling the Nacho situation. And at one point, Mike shuts himself in the trailer to ensure that he is heard by Gus. Mike starts to walk away and turns back around to look at Gus. Gus has his hand on the door and he looks at Mike. In other words, acknowledging that Mike looked back and giving him a chance to say something if he wants to say it. But Mike decides to hold his words back at this moment. He doesn't say anything. And then we see Gus shuts Mike out. So whereas in the beginning of the season, Mike shut himself in to make sure that he spoke his peace of mind about his personal morals and how Gus should act. Here in episode 9, we see that aspect of their relationship, Mike trying to act as some kind of conscience for Gus or some kind of moral guide for Gus, is over. Mike had nothing to say. Now, I know their relationship is still very close. Gus highly depends on Mike for operational advice. But what I'm saying, what Gus shut the door on was Mike's input on moral guidance and how Gus should treat other people. After this, Mike walks out of the tunnel and he shuts the light in the tunnel. This tunnel that connected the house that holds Mike and his men and the house that holds Gus. For this whole 5th season, this tunnel has been open, allowing Mike to freely move in between, let's say, his home security base and Gus's home. But now the doors to this tunnel have been shut and the light in the tunnel has been shut off. Gus heads to a bar. We do get the impression that Gus hasn't been in this bar for a while, but it's someplace that he does frequent. The initial bartender welcomes him back when he first walks in. Perhaps he hasn't been there since Lalo has started meddling with him. Again, another sign that Gus is letting the light back into his life now that the Lalo situation is resolved. But Gus goes a little too far in this moment. For just a moment, Gus forgets who he is. In Dedicato a Max, Gus explains to Mike that he knows exactly who he is and he doesn't pretend to be anybody different. In this moment, Gus and David are obviously very much into each other. They're certainly happy to see each other when they do, and they're also happy to listen to each other, to talk to each other. David even says, "Am I talking too much?" And Gus says, "No, not at all." He's very happy to hear what David has to say. But what Gus remembers after David walks away to go get that bottle of wine is he remembers who he is. And Gus remembers that if he brings somebody into his life, he is putting that person in serious potential danger. And at this point, we see that Gus may understand what love is better than any other character in the series. Because although David makes Gus happy, he knows that involving David in his life will put David in serious potential danger. And so Gus chooses to put David's safety above his own happiness. Gus does not pretend to be a normal businessman who can date other people and not put those other people in severe danger. Gus knows that he is part of a dangerous business, that he associates with very dangerous people, and that anybody he brings into his life will therefore be put into danger. And so instead of allowing himself to be swept up in this happiness that he feels with David and enjoy some pleasure in life, Gus does put David's safety above his own happiness. And no other character in this series really does this, except we do see that this is the turn that Kim makes by the end. To further emphasize this idea of pretending to be someone that we're not, we see Mike, and Mike is pretending to be a just man. We see Mike put his gun case in and out of place twice before he goes to visit Nacho's father. Mike, for the past 2 episodes, has been pretending to treat Howard with respect. Mike put meticulous effort into making sure that nobody would ever find out what happened to Howard. Mike, who is pretending to be a just man, did everything in his power to assure that Howard never gets justice. To get a better look at exactly what type of man Mike is being in these moments, it is best that we look at Mike through Cheryl's eyes. If Cheryl was able to see everything that Mike did after Howard was murdered, if she was able to see Mike tell the men, take it easy with Howard's corpse before they threw it in a pit, if Cheryl was able to see Mike walking around sulking about Howard being murdered and buried, how would Cheryl react to Mike? How would Cheryl see Mike? Do we think that Cheryl would see Mike as a just man? Or would Cheryl see Mike as a man who is trying to deceive justice? I can't help but to believe that Cheryl would look at Mike as a man who is trying to deceive justice. To further emphasize that Mike is pretending to be a just man, we get the meeting with Nacho's father. So anyways, we get to the point where Mike tells Nacho's father there's gonna be justice served for Nacho's death. And this is when Mike thinks it's the English word justice that Nacho's father doesn't understand, but it's really Mike that doesn't understand the concept of justice. Mike mistakes revenge for justice. And Nacho's father tells Mike this. And he also tells Mike that you're no better than any other gangster. You're just a typical gangster. Mike has been pretending to be a just man, but Mike doesn't even understand what justice is. And if we think about it, Mike has misunderstood justice from the beginning of this series, because Mike took this bit of revenge back in the first season for his son Maddie in the name of justice. But what Mike did was revenge. We see Jimmy and Kim entering HHM for Howard's services. This shot here at the elevator is a callback to the original episode Uno, when Jimmy's going up to talk to Howard about Chuck. We get 2 identical shots, Jimmy pressing the elevator button, and then Jimmy looking back at the wastebasket. In the first episode, we see that the wastebasket has a fairly large dent in it. And then when Jimmy comes back down, he starts taking all his frustrations from what happened up in the boardroom out on the wastebasket. And we realize, oh, that's why this garbage pail had a dent in it, because Jimmy takes his frustrations out of it. So we notice in this episode, Jimmy points out that it's a new wastebasket. And the reason why it's new is because all of Jimmy's frustrations, which he used to take out on this garbage pail, are gone with HHM. Jimmy's frustrations with HHM had to do with them not allowing him in the club. The people that kept Jimmy out of the club were Howard and Chuck. And now both Howard and Chuck are dead. So all the frustrations that Jimmy had about trying to be the lawyer he wanted to be in the beginning of this series are gone. He doesn't even want to be that person anymore. HHM is no longer even there. So that whole part of Jimmy's life, which was a major aspect of Jimmy's life for several years, is now resolved. And this fits in perfectly with what happens at the end, which we will get back to. Kim and Jimmy are definitely out of place at these services. We find out that from Rich that HHM is moving places now that Howard is gone. And we also see that Rich remembers it is Saul he is talking to and not Jimmy. Kim and Jimmy head up to offer their condolences to Cheryl. And this is a significant moment, a significant response from Jimmy when Cheryl asks him about things with Howard. What we see Jimmy do here is brilliant, impressive, and really scary. What Jimmy does is he gives some explanation to Cheryl as to why Howard felt that Jimmy was playing pranks on men and stuff. And in this explanation, what makes Saul Goodman so brilliant and dangerous is we see Jimmy take his raw emotional truth. Jimmy admits that it was hurtful for him to see Chuck treat Howard more like a brother than Chuck ever treated Jimmy. That's real, raw, painful emotion from Jimmy. And we see him offer this up to Cheryl. But Jimmy is not being an open and honest person at this point. He is lying. And what's so brilliant and dangerous about Saul Goodman is that he is able to manipulate even his own self in this manner. That he is able to take this raw emotional truth of himself and just wrap it up in a bunch of lies like it's all meaningless. He doesn't even respect the emotions of himself. This is not the first time we've seen Jimmy give a speech like this. The first time he does it is at the end of season 4 when he's in front of the review board and he's going to read Chuck's letter to the review board to sell a story. So anyways, after that, we see Kim try to step in, reinforce the story. It's hard to know if Kim, at first she's definitely trying to just reinforce the story. After that, it does seem that she's trying to offer Cheryl genuine comfort. It's hard to say if she is or if she isn't. I'm talking about when she puts her hand on Cheryl's shoulder and starts saying, well, you've known him for so long, you were his wife, you would know the real truth. I almost feel that Kim is trying to genuinely comfort Cheryl in that moment, and that Cheryl was basically like, you offer no comfort to anybody, and walked away from Kim, and this was a hard truth for Kim to swallow. But we do see all Kim does in this episode, specifically from this point on, is acknowledge, accept, and face truth. So there is a line between Kim and Jimmy. Kim has always kept a line between her and Jimmy through the vast majority of the series. She removes it after they get married, and then it goes back in place after Bad Choice Road. She actually puts it back in place after Jimmy pisses all over Kim's vulnerability. So here in the parking lot, we have this line between Kim and Jimmy in this really quiet moment where they're looking at each other. even though Jimmy doesn't know it, Kim is definitely breaking up with Jimmy. She crosses over the line to say goodbye to him, and then she gets right back on her side of the line, gets in her car, and pulls away. This is a really, really sad moment. So Kim is finished with her cigarette. We get a lot of close-ups throughout the series of Kim smoking. The shot we have gotten the most amount of times, the close-up shot, is of Kim lighting a new cigarette. We see in this shot, again, Kim is finished with her cigarette. They say I love you for the very first time this episode. It took 6 seasons. They've never said I love you to one another. And they finally say it just moments before the relationship is over. Kim finally admits the truth. She's admitting a lot of truths at this point. And after Jimmy says, I love you, Kim says, I love you too. She's had the time of her life with Jimmy. But what's it matter? What's it matter that we love each other when we're poison to everyone around us? And so this is where we see Kim becoming much more like Gus than Mike and Jimmy. Kim is acknowledging the truth of her actions. She's no longer pretending that because she does pro bono work for low-income people that she's a good person, no matter what else she does, and it makes up for anything she does to Howard and all this. Kim is facing the reality of her actions, and the reality of her actions are they hurt a lot of people for their own enjoyment, and Kim just can't do that anymore. So if he's been Saul, as I've said, what is the difference between him standing here with Kim as we hear the taping the boxes that Kim is packing, to when he wakes up in his spinning bed? It's so obnoxious that this bed spins, that he stops in place and wakes up. And the difference is, we could say it a couple ways. There's no more happiness in Saul's life once we see him in the mansion. Kim made Saul happy, and Kim's now out of his life. But more significantly, I think there's no personal life left for Saul. One of the things that we learned in season 5, Saul said it several times to people, is my friends call me Jimmy. When I'm at work, I'm Saul. So this is where the Jimmy went. Saul lost all personal relationships in his life. I don't think we'll ever hear him say, stop calling me Jimmy to people. I'm fairly certain what happened is all of his friends fell out of his life. The only relationships he has are business relationships. And so everybody just calls him Saul. This idea of having no personal relationships is stressed throughout this entire clip that we get at the end. He wakes up, like I said, he puts his bed in place. Then he puts his companion that is in bed with him in place, who is a sex worker that he pays for sex, because it is not a personal relationship. It is a business transaction. He gets on the phone and he immediately starts putting people in their place, demanding this and demanding that. It is all business talk. Showers are one of the best things we have going in our lives. I mean, seriously, a good shower is, I can't think of many things better. So as Jimmy is in this beautiful shower, by the way, he's not standing there and enjoying it. He is on the phone working. Again, when he sits down, he's sitting down and eating, the whole time he's on the phone working. And the thing is specifically in season 4, we saw quite a few of Jimmy's mornings and how he starts them off. And I kind of like the way Jimmy started off his mornings, a little nutrition. He would juice, coffee, some food. And it was usually quiet. He wouldn't put the TV on. He wouldn't put a radio on. He didn't get on the phone. He just sat there by himself. But not this time. As soon as his feet hit the floor, the Bluetooth is in his ear, and he is straight to business. We then cut to Jimmy in the Cadillac, driving into work, again, on the phone, all business. But we get sort of another callback concerning Kim. His new commercial plays, and we see that the Better Call Saul slogan is in place for him. It seems like it's a new thing that he's just starting it. He doesn't like how the commercial sounds because it's in mono. But while the commercial is playing, before he decides he doesn't like the sound because it's in mono, Jimmy is, I mean, he's, if you look at him, he is like looking, he's so proud of himself and he's smiling. He's so happy. You know, I think James McGill's best life was James McGill becoming an advertising, working at an advertising agency or starting an advertising agency. He really loves making these ads. But anyways, so he's in the Cadillac, he's smiling, he's so proud of himself. And this is a callback to Kim because Jimmy was always so excited to show Kim the advertisements that he created. I specifically remember when Chuck was in the hospital and he made one of his new commercials and Kim is sitting there and she sees it. And Kim really is so proud of him and she's so happy with him that he was able to make this. But again, what they're really emphasizing in this closing is that there is no personal life left for Saul. So he is smiling at no one. He has nobody to share the excitement of his new commercial with. Jimmy arrives at the office. He gets out of the car and realizes he has to get back in because he has to put the handicap sign in place. He goes into the office and it's one of the things I found most surprising that the whole interior of the office was already redone, but the whole interior of the office is redone. Jimmy sits down at this moment. Again, he puts his Bluetooth in place. He takes it off and puts it in place. Mug he's using says the world's greatest lawyer, which is obviously a callback to the mug that Kim gave him 2 different times and eventually had a bullet hole in it. I loved the coffee mug that Kim gave to Jimmy. It was, I don't know, I just loved it. It said second best lawyer. That was such a great little joke from Kim. I don't know. It was just like a great thing. This coffee mug is so pathetic because Jimmy bought it for himself and it says world's greatest lawyer. It actually reminds me of Michael Scott, which is funny because Bob Odenkirk almost played Michael Scott. But anyways, okay, so he sits down in the office at this moment. Now remember, in the beginning of the episode, the cold open ends with Jimmy giving the speech from Bad Choice Road, which is someday you'll wake up and you won't think about it and then you'll realize you can forget about it. I do think that's what we're supposed to take from the end, from Jimmy sitting at his desk there. He just went through his whole morning. We basically watched him nonstop through it, and not for one moment did we catch him in reflection, thinking about something, looking a little sad or down. I think that when we see Jimmy at the desk in this moment, he has already made it past the point of knowing he can forget about Kim. And I think he has forgotten about Kim. He is all Saul Goodman here. He is nothing but business. There is no personal connections left in Saul Goodman's life. And that makes him completely ready to meet Walt and Jesse. I'm not sure how this is going to happen. My biggest question is, it does appear to be 2005 in Saul's current timeline. Breaking Bad does not begin until 2008. My basic guess in all of this, because they're definitely bringing in the Breaking Bad timeline very soon. Specifically, when you think about it, we only have 4 episodes left and they still have to deal with Gene. So the Breaking Bad timeline's coming in very soon. The connections I see with the Breaking Bad timeline are 2 different places. One, if you remember in the pilot episode of Breaking Bad, it's Walt's birthday. There's a birthday party. Hank has everybody gather around the TV set because Hank just made a huge drug bust that day. So I do see this drug bust by Hank being a possible place where they could work in a connection between Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. But the biggest place I see it is in the episode, we meet Saul in the episode titled Better Call Saul in Breaking Bad. And Walt and Jesse go to Saul for help. It's a couple episodes after that that we see Saul show up because he wants to talk to Walt. We see Saul show up and try to talk Walt into being his client. That's always stuck out to me. What motivated Jimmy to go to Walt after those couple days? What happens there? What makes Jimmy decide to go to Walt and say, I should be your Tom Higgins? I think that is what we're going to see play out. Thanks so much for watching and have a great day.